You know how every small American town has that one picture-perfect family? White picket fence, SUV in the driveway, church every Sunday, and a wife who brings casseroles to every potluck. Yeah, that was us. At least that's what people thought. To the outside world, we were a family carved straight out of a Hallmark movie, complete with the pastor's blessing and neighbors waving across the street. But behind those suburban blinds, what I didn't know was that my so-called perfect life was actually the trailer for a toxic love soap opera about cheating, betrayal, and the kind of infidelity that would make even Jerry Springer choke on his morning coffee. My wife, let's call her Rebecca, because every scandalous Southern church tale needs a Rebecca, had this glow about her that everyone in town adored. People thought she was the poster child for loyalty and purity. The irony, of course, was that purity was the last thing happening behind our bedroom door. And our pastor, the man who baptized our kids, the man who shook my hand every Sunday while saying, "Peace be with you, brother," turns out he was giving my wife a very different kind of blessing when nobody was watching. Now here's where the parody part kicks in. The whole thing unfolded like one of those cheesy conspiracy documentaries on late-night cable TV. Imagine the narrator's voice. In small-town America, one man trusted his pastor, but what he didn't know was that his wife and the man of God were rehearsing their own book of Revelation in bed. Yeah, hilarious if it wasn't my life. I first started noticing something weird when Rebecca suddenly became super devoted to church activities. She was volunteering for every single event. Bible study on Tuesday, choir practice Wednesday, charity bake sale Thursday. I thought, wow, my wife must really love Jesus. Turns out she was just making excuses to go see the pastor, who apparently offered private scripture lessons that lasted 3 hours and required scented candles. At first, I dismissed the signs like any American husband too distracted by football games and bills. She'd come home late, hair a little messed up, lipstick half gone, and I'd actually believe her when she said, "Oh, honey, choir practice went long." Choir practice? Really? The only music being made was moaning hymns in the pastor's office. And then the pregnancy bomb dropped. One Sunday morning, she told me, with this angelic glow on her face, "Honey, we're going to have another baby." At first, I was over the moon. Family is everything, right? The idea of bringing another little soul into the world gave me this warm feeling. But here's where fate, or karma, slapped me straight across the face. Something didn't add up. The timing, the math, the fact that I had been sleeping on the couch for a month after our last fight. Unless I was Joseph and she was Mary, this baby was not mine. That's when my paranoia turned into full-blown amateur detective work. Forget CSI, this was more like Husband Sleuth Unit. I checked her phone, followed her car, even sat through boring Wednesday sermons just to catch the flicker of guilt in her eyes when the pastor preached about sin. You ever watch those conspiracy theorists on YouTube connecting dots with red string on a corkboard? That was me, except the string ended at the pastor's bedroom. The breaking point came when I found a sticky note tucked into her Bible, not a prayer, not a verse, but a message from the pastor himself. Tonight, after choir, wear the red dress. If betrayal had a smell, it would have been cheap cologne and church wine. Now here's the kicker. Everyone in town loved this guy. The pastor wasn't just a religious figure, he was the local celebrity, the moral compass, the man who showed up at every barbecue and little league game. To accuse him of cheating with my wife would be like saying Santa Claus stole your wallet. People wouldn't believe it unless I had proof. So I did what any betrayed American husband with a thirst for revenge would do. I started planning. This wasn't going to be some private confrontation. No, this was going to be public, loud, theatrical. If my wife and pastor wanted a forbidden romance, I was going to turn it into a Greek tragedy. I was going to expose their affair in front of the entire congregation, make it the Sunday sermon nobody would ever forget. Because here's the thing about betrayal. When someone stabs you in the back, you don't just pull out the knife, you twist it back, in public, with a smile. Infidelity may have wrecked my family, but revenge was about to become my new religion. If Part 1 felt like a soap opera, Part 2 was straight-up daytime talk show drama, the kind where Maury Povich would walk on stage holding an envelope and say, "In the case of Rebecca's unborn child, you are not the father." Except this wasn't a TV show, it was my life, and the laugh track was just my own sanity cracking in the background. The first weeks after her big pregnancy announcement, I tried to convince myself maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe this was just another example of my paranoid brain stringing together conspiracy theories like those guys on late-night radio yelling about aliens. But the thing is, aliens never leave lipstick on your husband's shirt collar. Pastors apparently do. Rebecca was glowing, but not in the way normal pregnant women glow. She wasn't glowing with family joy. She was glowing like someone who just won the jackpot at the cheating casino of life. And she played it so perfectly. She'd touch her stomach, sigh, and say things like, "God has blessed us with another miracle." Every time she said it, I wanted to laugh and scream at the same time. Blessed? Lady, the only miracle here is that your pastor boyfriend hasn't been struck down by lightning mid-sermon. Here's the thing about infidelity. It makes every detail feel like a crime scene. Every glance, every word, every late-night grocery run suddenly becomes Exhibit A, B, and C in the case of the People versus my cheating wife. I kept replaying nights when she came home late, the whispers I thought I overheard, the sermons where the pastor couldn't even look me in the eye. It was betrayal wrapped in Bible verses, toxic love dressed up as holy devotion. And like any American husband raised on too much reality TV, I decided to go full detective. Forget calling the cops. This was a one-man investigation. I borrowed my buddy's old camera, the kind with night vision, and actually followed Rebecca to choir practice. And what did I see? Not hymns, not sheet music. Oh no, I saw shadows moving behind the frosted glass of the pastor's office. Two silhouettes merging like the worst R-rated parody of Amazing Grace you could imagine. I should have stormed in right then, but instead, I froze. Because in that moment, I realized the nightmare was bigger than just cheating. There was a baby involved. My family name, my future, my sanity, all tangled up in the most humiliating scandal since Bill Clinton and the blue dress. Only this time, I wasn't the president. I was the guy getting laughed at behind closed doors. The whispers in town started small. Someone at the grocery store said, "Rebecca looks different these days." Someone at the diner said, "Pastor sure is spending a lot of time mentoring young wives." It spread like wildfire, the way gossip always does in small-town America. People didn't say it outright, but I saw the smirks, the raised eyebrows. I was the punchline of a joke I didn't even write. And yet Rebecca kept playing her role, acting like the loving wife. She'd hug me in public, smile, talk about baby names like nothing was wrong. Behind closed doors, though, she was distant, secretive. And the pastor? Oh, he doubled down on his sermons about temptation and the importance of family. The hypocrisy was so thick you could butter your toast with it. Now, here's the twist that made everything worse. One night, while Rebecca was asleep, I found her journal. And in it, page after page, wasn't about me, or our kids, or even God. It was about him. The pastor, her soulmate, her true love. She wrote about how this baby was their bond, their destiny, how I was just in the way. That was the night I stopped being just a betrayed husband. That was the night revenge moved into my house and set up camp in my brain. But here's where the parody kicks in again, because instead of doing the logical thing, divorce, lawyers, custody battles, I decided to plot something way more theatrical. If this was going to be toxic love, then I'd make it the most toxic show on earth. The kind of revenge Shakespeare would have written if he'd lived in a Texas suburb with HOA rules and Sunday potlucks. I imagined scenarios. What if I announced the truth during the baby shower? Imagine the cake cutting, balloons floating, everyone clapping. Then, boom, I dropped the DNA results like confetti. Or what if I crashed one of the pastor's sermons, walked up on stage, grabbed the mic, and yelled, "You want to talk about family values? Tell them whose baby this is." The possibilities were endless, and each one played in my head like a twisted comedy sketch. Because here's the thing, when your wife cheats on you with the one man you trusted most, the betrayal burns deep. But when she carries his child and calls it a blessing, that betrayal transforms. It's no longer just about pain. It's about humiliation, about being made a fool in front of your entire community. And the only cure for humiliation, at least in my American brain, was revenge served not cold, but flaming hot, with a side of public spectacle. So I waited. I smiled in public, nodded at neighbors, played the role of clueless husband. But behind the curtain, I was building my plan, because sooner or later, the pastor and my wife were going to find out that betraying me was the worst mistake of their lives. You ever watch those heist movies where a group of criminals plan the perfect bank robbery? Ocean's 11, The Italian Job, all that slick music and slow-motion walking? That was me, except my heist wasn't stealing money, it was stealing back my dignity. And instead of George Clooney, it was just me, a pissed-off suburban husband with too much time on my hands and a head full of betrayal. See, betrayal doesn't just stab you, it rewires your brain. Suddenly, every song on the radio sounds like it's mocking you. Every church hymn feels like a parody. Every family dinner turns into a silent sitcom laugh track. And so I decided my revenge had to be biblical, not in a love-your-enemy way, more like Old Testament wrath. Fire and brimstone, but with a PowerPoint presentation. I started collecting evidence like a conspiracy theorist prepping for doomsday. Screenshots of texts between Rebecca and Pastor Holy Hands. Receipts from fancy motels just outside town. Photos I snapped of their choir practice. I had enough material to make an HBO limited series called Cheating in the Name of the Lord. If Netflix can greenlight 10 seasons of true crime documentaries, they'd beg me for this one. Now here's the parody twist. I didn't just want to confront them, I wanted to put on a show. America loves spectacle, right? Football halftime shows, reality TV meltdowns, presidential debates where nobody actually answers the question. Why should my revenge be any different? If my wife and pastor wanted toxic love, I was about to turn it into a toxic Broadway musical with me as the director. So I picked the perfect stage. Sunday service, the house of God, packed pews, choir singing, old ladies fanning themselves with church bulletins. It was poetic. If they could betray me in secret, I'd betray their secrets in public. The week leading up to it, I rehearsed like a madman. Picture me in front of the mirror, practicing lines. Dear congregation, today's sermon is brought to you by adultery. Or, Pastor, would you care to explain why my wife is carrying your miracle? I even debated dramatic props. Maybe roll in a stroller with a Not the Father sign taped to it. Maybe hire a mariachi band to play sad songs while I drop the DNA results. In my head, it was part Shakespeare, part Jerry Springer, part WWE SmackDown. Meanwhile, Rebecca was busy planning her baby shower, smiling like nothing was wrong. Pastor was preaching about family values, like he wasn't starring in the Infidelity Olympics. The hypocrisy was so thick I thought about bottling it and selling it as maple syrup. Finally, the day came. Sunday morning. The church smelled like coffee, perfume, and denial. I walked in carrying a manila envelope stuffed with all my evidence. To the outside world, I looked like the same old husband, but inside, my brain was a marching band of rage, every drumbeat yelling revenge, revenge, revenge. The service started as usual, Choir sang, kids ran around, everyone nodded politely at the pastor's jokes. Rebecca sat in the front pew, glowing like the Virgin Mary, except her halo was bought at Target and her baby wasn't mine. I sat there smiling, the kind of fake smile that hides a hurricane. Then it happened. Pastor walked up to the pulpit, cleared his throat, and started another sermon about temptation. That was my cue. I stood up, envelope in hand, and walked down the aisle. People thought maybe I was giving a testimony. Little did they know, this was the pilot episode of the real betrayals of small-town America. "Excuse me," I said, loud enough for the whole room. "I think today's sermon needs a little visual aid." And with that, I opened the envelope and started passing out photos. Gasps spread through the congregation like wildfire. Old ladies clutched their pearls. Teenagers snickered. One guy shouted, "Holy hell!" which was pretty on brand for the occasion. The pastor stuttered, tried to wave it off, but I wasn't finished. Oh no, this was my moment. I pulled out the hotel receipts, the texts, the sticky note with "red dress" written on it. "Family values?" I barked. "This man has been preaching about family while creating his own side family with my wife." Rebecca's face went pale. Pastor looked like someone pulled the plug on his soul. The congregation turned into a live audience, every gasp and whisper fueling me like applause. For once, I wasn't the fool. I was the director, the star, the narrator of their downfall. And just when they thought it couldn't get worse, I pulled out the final card, a DNA test. I hadn't even confirmed it yet, but the dramatics worked. I waved the paper like Moses holding the tablets. "And this," I announced, "proves the child she carries isn't mine. It belongs to him." Pandemonium, people shouting, someone fainted. The choir stopped mid-hymn. It was chaos, beautiful, glorious chaos. For a moment, I almost felt bad. Almost. But then I remembered every lie, every betrayal, every night I sat alone while they played house behind my back. No, I didn't feel bad. I felt alive. As Rebecca sobbed and the pastor tried to pray his way out of it, I turned to the crowd and bowed, literally bowed. Because if you're going to expose toxic love, you might as well do it with style. That was the day their perfect facade shattered. That was the day my revenge went from fantasy to history. You'd think after a Sunday service turned into the Super Bowl of betrayal, Rebecca and Pastor Holy Hands would try to lay low, maybe disappear for a while, move to another state, join a witness protection program for adulterers. But nope. This is America, where scandals don't just die quietly. They explode, spread, and live forever on Facebook groups run by retired ladies with too much free time. By Monday morning, the entire town knew. The church was split into two camps, Camp Denial, full of sweet old folks insisting the pastor would never, and Camp Receipts, which was everyone who had seen the photos I handed out like church flyers. By Tuesday, someone had leaked the story to a local gossip blog. By Wednesday, it was on Facebook with 200 angry comments, and by Friday, it was on TikTok under the hashtag Pastor of Infidelity. For Rebecca, it was like watching a Hallmark heroine turn into the town villain overnight. She went from sweetheart of the bake sale to homewrecker with a baby bump. People whispered behind her back in the grocery store. Mothers pulled their kids away from her in Target. Her family, the ones who used to brag about our perfect marriage, suddenly ghosted her like she was a bad credit score. She called me one night sobbing, saying I had ruined her life. I said, "Correction, you ruined your life. I just gave it a stage." And the pastor, oh, he got the deluxe package of humiliation. The church elders held an emergency meeting and stripped him of his position. The man who once preached about family values now had no job, no pulpit, and no moral high ground. One Sunday he was blessing babies. The next Sunday he was the cautionary tale people use to scare teenagers about cheating. He tried to spin it, of course, claiming the devil tempted him, But when your betrayal is trending online with memes of you photoshopped as Judas, there's no sermon that can save you. Meanwhile, Rebecca's pregnancy became the ultimate small-town spectacle. Every time her belly grew, it was like a public scoreboard of infidelity. People would whisper, "That's the pastor's baby," like it was the latest plot twist on a reality show. She couldn't go to church anymore, couldn't show her face at family gatherings, couldn't even post a baby bump photo without the comment section turning into a roast battle. And me? I won't lie, I was thriving. For once, I wasn't the fool. I was the man who turned betrayal into entertainment. My revenge wasn't just personal, it was community theater. Neighbors I barely knew came up to me and whispered, "Good job, man." Strangers at the gas station bought me coffee, calling me the guy who exposed the pastor. I became a local legend, the suburban Robin Hood of heartbreak, stealing back my pride from toxic love and giving the people a show they'd never forget. But revenge is a tricky thing. It doesn't just destroy your enemies, it changes you too. Late at night, I'd sit in the silence of my empty house and wonder if I had gone too far. Had I ruined Rebecca and the pastor's lives beyond repair? Had I become the villain in my own story? Then I'd remember the sticky note in the Bible, the motel receipts, the way she wrote about her soulmate in her journal, and I'd think, nope, they earned every bit of this downfall. As months passed, the fallout grew. Rebecca gave birth, and sure enough, the baby looked nothing like me. It was like the universe stamped Exhibit A on its forehead. She tried to raise the child with the pastor, but toxic love built on betrayal doesn't last. Within weeks, they were fighting, screaming matches in Walmart parking lots, passive-aggressive Facebook posts about fake people and loyalty. Their romance, once sizzling with forbidden lust, turned into a public soap opera nobody wanted to watch. The pastor, broke and unemployed, ended up moving into a cheap apartment on the edge of town. Rebecca followed, dragging her scandal with her. Their so-called love child became the daily reminder of everything they lost. Instead of building a new life, they built a circus of arguments, regret, and resentment. Betrayal had brought them together, but revenge and reality kept tearing them apart. And me? I moved on, slowly, painfully, but with a strange sense of freedom. Infidelity had burned my marriage to the ground, but from the ashes, I built something stronger, a spine. I learned that family isn't just about blood, it's about loyalty. And loyalty doesn't cheat in church pews or write love notes in Bibles. Looking back, some people asked me if I regretted the spectacle, the drama, the humiliation I unleashed. Honestly, no. Because betrayal demands an answer, and revenge was mine. If they had kept their affair private, maybe I'd have walked away quietly. But they paraded their toxic love in the shadows of my own home, under the roof of my family, while smiling to my face every Sunday. They wanted a secret? I gave them a scandal. In the end, Rebecca lost her reputation, the pastor lost his pulpit, and I lost the illusion of a perfect marriage. But what I gained was something far more satisfying: the truth, the control, and the knowledge that sometimes the best way to deal with betrayal is to make it unforgettable. Because in small-town America, forgiveness is optional, but humiliation, that's forever.